just to begin the recording session right now. The presentation will start in a few minutes. We want to wait and see if others will join us, and we have we still have a good amount of time. Corrinne and everyone should just kind of remind you that this session needs to end on time, because then we go directly back to the main room for the closing 15 minutes of the symposium. So we are definitely going to keep track of the clock here and end on time to allow everyone to be able to hop back into the main room of the closing session for the closing session. So good morning, welcome everyone. The session is being recorded. It's 11 o'clock exactly right now. We'll give one more minute to allow others to join. Hi, Gail. Happy December break coming up.
You've made it.
Yes, we have made it. Yes. Yeah.
With sanity overall intact.
So far, yeah. So as you see, participants, welcome. Thank you for joining us. As you see, we have left your microphones available to you. And I just want to tell you that our presenter, Corrinne Lockamy, would love for you to just, speak up if you like, or if you want to share your questions on the chat. That way, either way, whatever's more comfortable for you. We're waiting a few minutes just one more minute to allow for everyone to join us. And the session is being recorded. So we're already being recorded. Thank you. Okay, I think we should go ahead and begin. As I said earlier, this session will end promptly at 11:45 to allow everyone to jump back into the main session for our closing remarks. So to begin, welcome Corrinne Lockamy, who will talk to us about our access services. Welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone. Big hearty hello, and we've made it to the last day of our fall term. We have some hours to go, but I know that we can do it. So again, congratulations for what we've been able to accomplish. I hope that my presentation gives you the ability to be able to go into next term with some questions that you may have answered, some things to possibly get more information to kind of deeper take a look at, and possibly even reach out to your access coordinator or access director at each of your campuses and ask them questions. And by all means, you can let them know that you took a training with me, and from what you learned or from what you thought about, you have better and deeper questions from there. And what I'll do towards the end, or kind of as we go, I may put some websites for you to take a look at. In case it's helpful. For example, the Access webpage would show you how to connect and who to contact for each one of your campuses. I didn't put that in the slide because I wanted to keep the PowerPoint kind of brief and to the point, so that we had opportunity to talk about questions and talk about things that you were more curious about than looking at information that you could view later on kind of on your own. So with that, I'm kind of going to get started. And today's presentation, like was mentioned, is about disability awareness, how that kind of ties into an office that we have at our campus called Access, which is where students connect to be able to get the opportunities and the connection to have extended time on their test, different services, but some of those services actually will come to, tutors if the student is referred to tutoring or knows that they should have tutoring as part of their plan. So with that, we're going to get started. And like was mentioned before, if you have questions, your audio is left on. You can raise your hand if you'd like. You can type your question in the chat, and I will be happy to read the question out loud and then to be able to answer it. And then if people want to put feedback on the question or even the answer, I welcome you to do such. Okay, so you saw this, the title, and it said what it said, and then it had an opportunity for this word ally. So this is something that I created at the Hialeah campus just this year, actually just a few months ago. And it's the opportunity for students, for faculty, and for staff to understand what access is. Again, the opportunity for students to connect to an office, to be able to turn in documentation that they have from a doctor, a psychologist, psychiatrist, even from their school, what we call an individual academic plan, something that they worked on through high school that stated particular things about a disability that they have and the ways that they were going to overcome it, and tutoring that they would be responsible for attaining, opportunities to also have extended test time or more time to work on projects due to certain things. So I wanted to take the opportunity to bring that information to more students, to faculty, to staff. What happens when a student with a disability goes to an academic advisor, goes to a tutor, goes to someone? Do they feel comfortable being able to share that they have a disability? So I felt a training like such, and your guys has a piece at the end, which was the tutor component, but the opportunity for more people to be aware of what this is and possibly earn a certificate at the end that has this logo that states, hey, I went through a training and I am familiar with talking about disability with you. So therefore, if the student also is a member of the Access Department, they're familiar with this logo and they make a deeper connection. So I offer to you at the end of this presentation, this is the first part of a 2-series training. So you all who are here have the first part. So you may be the first MDC employees college-wide to have this training, to be able to have this designation. So be excited. Okay, so the next slide here, and we're going to go through some of these very quickly so that we can get to the meat of the presentation. But I just wanted to let you know, when we talk about disabilities, it's not because we see a disability. It's not necessarily because the way that someone may be speaking or the way that they may function. So I wanted to list the opportunities so that we are knowledgeable and understand that disability can come from the opportunity of having a physical disability or a mental condition. And I listed some of them here. So we have the opportunity of it, extrapolating on mobility, the idea of communication, or the idea of learning, and then our categories. And a lot of these categories are seen through our students at Miami-Dade College. So we do have students that operate within the autism spectrum. I do not have time to go through, all of the disabilities, but I want to give you like a generalized opportunity. So with someone who has autism, they various degrees. Everyone who has autism is not the same. They learn differently. They need different things. They understand and process things in such a way. So different degrees. We have students who may have not been born with a disability, but had traumatic brain injury because of an accident that they were involved in, or a condition that has developed over time that then has led to something else. We have students who are deaf or hard of hearing, who may need a sign language interpreter or someone, to work with them that you may in fact see in their classes with them or come to tutoring with them because they're the interpreter of what the person that is giving the service is giving. Then you have different learning disabilities. You have ADHD, ADD, things of that. And again, those students may need to learn a little bit different, see things a little bit different, been given things at a different speed than what was maybe given in class, or the opportunity for them to develop the skill and be exposed to the information even longer than some of our students. A lot of students who get this type of service may have um, we're working with their professor, where the professor is responsible for getting that student the information ahead of time. So we're going to go over chapter 1 and 2 next class. Hopefully that student and that professor is already engaged in that information being given to that student ahead of time. Then you have students with speech impediments, visual impairment. That could be anything from wall vision to some degree of being blind. Okay, then we have other health impairments. We have things these days that have different effects on students. We have, things like asthma and sickle cell and things like that. So some of these disabilities don't, as I mentioned before, you don't see them, but they exist. So it's something else to just think. I'm not saying when a student comes to you, if you feel they're a little bit off, it's not, oh my goodness, they must have a disability. There's a way that I'm going to suggest that we talk about that to figure that out, to be able to be helpful to the student. Now, I don't want to take up a lot of our time reading through legal framework. As was mentioned, this PowerPoint is connected in the LibGuide so that you can go back and read it. But these are some, not all, but these are the main legal framework pieces that a college is responsible for having access services connected to their institution so that students are able to get what we call reasonable accommodations. Reasonable accommodations means that a student can get these things if they turn in documentation, and that it doesn't take away from the academic rigor of a course program. And I will explain that later if needed. But again, these are just simple guidelines. And like I said, you can go back and look at them if you really wanted like a deeper understanding. So, like I said, students who belong to the Access program and want to get services and have the opportunity to connect with professors in such a way to get extra help or assistance that makes them be equally successful in the college experience, even though they do have their disability, these services kind of give them an equal framework as the average student going to a college or university. So simply, students with disabilities must self-identify, and submit documentation. A student can't just say, hey, I have a disability, give me these accommodations. No, they have to have proof. And like I said earlier, it's documentation from a licensed psychologist, doctor, and such that has the opportunity to comment the student's disability and even give opportunities for um, like the access services that the student would get. Some doctors do identify because the student has ADHD, they could use or should need dot 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 dot, and then we kind of go through there and put those pieces of information together. Like I said, it comes from those variants of doctors and also the opportunity previously mentioned as well. If the student did go to high school and they were getting services from said high school, the student has something called an individual education plan, an IEP, that can also be submitted to us for that documentation. And like I said, all these things must be what we call reasonable. It may not implement on the opportunity to modify to a extent an academic program. For example, a student who has a physical disability such like cerebral palsy, say they need to be on their feet to do particular, operations and particular things. If that disability infers on that academic program and it can be proven that that student should not be able to be successful, then there's some conversation to be had on how the student can meet what they want to do, possibly in a different program. We are very careful with that, but we do take that into absolute consideration so that we're giving the student the correct resources and materials to be successful. Now, functions of the office, these are our three main pillars that we explain to the student and that we want everyone to know, so that if you all as MDC professionals have questions, you know that these are the things that we're responsible for. So documentation, coordination of the services. Say, for example, someone needs tutoring, not tutoring, translation services and things. We need to find a translator for that student in a particular class or in their series of classes. And that is something that we have to put into place with the professor, work with the professor to coordinate. It's almost like having an extra body, in class. And for the sake of remote learning, some of these have even been an experience for us because, what does it look like for a student who needs sign language services to have them in a remote class? What does it look like for a student? And we even have struggled a little bit. What does tutoring look like? Which is what we're going to get to talk about next, which is why we're here. But, what does that struggle look like, and how can we be helpful to those students, whether in remote or whether we're not? Our second pillar is to advocate for the opportunities that I mentioned earlier, divided in the sections of the law that we must fulfill as an institution to the student. And then the opportunity to be able to have conversations with you all, with faculty, with other staff, that kind of gives them trainings like this and brings awareness. Things change over time, laws change over time, people change over time. Remote experience in education has had us change in that same experience. So those are the functions of the office as a whole. Now, this is something that I want to begin to talk about with you, because we have some time. We have 25 minutes to kind of dig through some things, but I also wanted to talk to you about what you have questions that are out in the universe that I may not have put here. And I only put 4, but these are the few that I thought, you would have the opportunity to be curious about and want to know. So how do I know if a student is registered with Access, and how may what they need be extra or different than what you normally give to a student? How do I refer a student to seek out possible campus services? What strategies can I use to assist a student that has a disability? And what do I do if I'm not sure how to help the student best? So these are the 4 main questions, like I said, that I thought would be helpful to you. I can give you the ideas that I have behind those opportunities, but then I also want you to be able to chime in and say, hey, Corrinne, what about this and what about that? Because as we learned earlier and as we saw in the images that were shared with us, a lot of this is about how do we treat everyone the same, but then how do we recognize the differences that people may have and adapt what we're doing so it fits everyone, but it's addressing the need of, possibly a different group of people, but the services are for everyone. So in the attached documents outside of this presentation, there are a set of tutor tips that I put and some strategies. What I did was I took them from another institution. I did clean them up a little bit and took out a few that I thought were not necessarily needed for the sake of space and time. But I want to consider what we do as tutors and what we do as professionals when we're working with students, because a lot of times we say, okay, this is the way something is, and we go, and that's the way that we keep it. And sometimes we forget, hey, these students may have different needs, like I said, over time as things develop, and then we have the opportunity to kind of change and develop with those. So the first question that I would like, I'll answer, and then I would like you guys to give me some feedback, is how do I assist a student Or how do I know a student is registered with Access and may need extra or different services? And the answer is you don't know this unless they self-disclose. Now, how can you get them to self-disclose if you feel maybe that they are an Access student, they're just not telling you? And there's some strategies to do that. As anytime we have a conversation with a student in academic advisement or from another service area, we may have the opportunity to offer student our hybrid of services. So you can ask the student, while we're going through this activity or while we're doing this, can I ask you a question? Do you work with any of the other departments on campus? We have a lot of services, and as a tutor I offer and I remind students about them, but we have things like single stop, and obviously they're with you in learning resources, so maybe you want to throw in a different type of service through learning resources. There's an Access office. They help students with disabilities. There's Trio and Trio's responsibility, and you can go on and on. But assume they say, oh yeah, I'm registered with Access. Oh, okay. Well, can we have a quick conversation? When you study or when you're in class, what are the things that are most helpful to you? Because this is where you're going to get a student to tell you maybe a little bit about their disability without them saying, hey, I have ADHD. Or if they convey that they have that, then you can say, okay, well, what are the best ways that I can go through this material and review with you? And you're going to get things like, okay, can we go through this information slowly? Can we go through this step by step? And this is where I suggest almost that you take the strategies that you would have with being a tutor and really just implement them kind of a little bit more specific. When you go over concepts with a student, do one concept at a time. That's helpful to a lot of people. But for someone who has a learning disability or even a visual disability, doing something and accomplishing it and showing that it's accomplished, using colors to show differences as your equation changes. Our first step is this. Our second step is this. Now, this may take a little bit more time, and that's going to be up to you to figure out how to develop what you need with that student with the time that you have. But after you do this a few times, it's going to be comfortable and familiar with you. But time is something. You also, with any student, I say, but especially a student with a learning disability, the idea of you teaching them and then having them explain to you, rephrasing what they learned to make sure they understand is key. So you say, okay, now that we went over the definition of a right angle, do you understand? Yes. Okay, just to check in, tell me what you remember or tell me what you recall. And again, that's just having them reflect what they learned, and do not be afraid if in fact they are incorrect a little bit or incorrect a lot, they just didn't get it. Don't worry. You can let them know, well, okay, let's try this another way and explain to it in a different way and see if they catch it on to that piece. So those are two pieces that I think are super important. Also encourage the student to, do you have materials from class? I know that's something you probably ask a lot of your students, but a lot of the students may have who work with Access materials given to them ahead of time. Maybe they're already printed out. Maybe they're on a particular PowerPoint. Ask the students what materials that they were given from their professor to work on these concepts, because you also may see materials directly from the professor's PowerPoint and such. And this way it gives the student the opportunity to see that it's important to have their materials. It is important to ask for them. Sometimes the students forget to ask. Sometimes the professor forgets to give it to the student, ahead of time. So you're kind of checking in with them, but you're also helping them remember the importance of getting the materials and such that they need to get from the professor. And I also say, we were talking a little bit before the session started, know that some of your campuses do have access services with tutoring involved. And then you say, oh, I'm at one of those campuses, I'm just going to tell those students to go to access, which is good. If you are unsure on how to tutor a certain something and you've asked for assistance, also know that you can ask the connection to the access office and ask the access office, hey, students have been coming by and they seem to be, do you have tips and strategies for me connecting directly to that office? Now, just because your campus may have an access office with tutoring in it, please don't assume that that means that we shouldn't be prepared to be able to assist a student. And I say that because what if their tutor in access is sick? What if they're working in a group and the group comes to get tutoring? I also tell access students, as do my colleagues, tutoring or coming to learning resources doesn't mean that you don't know your content. It just means that you want to go over it. That means you're studying it. It just doesn't necessarily mean that you don't know. Yes, tutors are there, resources are there for a student to learn if they've missed something or they don't understand, but it's also to reframe and to rephrase their work. So also encourage them. I see that you're here, real quick to work on these points. After you work on these points, engage them to stay in that study space, and then they may feel more comfortable coming back and going, hey, that my disability is, cool in this space, and there's people here to help me. And if the student tells you and is able to communicate a way for you to help them best, be open to that as well. Okay, so anybody have questions about that first bullet point or any feedback that you would like to add there? Okay, I don't see any hands, nothing in the text box. Guys, I hope I'm not boring you. So we'll keep going. Okay, how do I refer to a student, or how do I refer a student to seek out possible campus services? Now this one is a little bit tricky, because again, you don't want to assume that someone has some type of disability, because maybe people are just having an off day and can't concentrate, well. Maybe they're being distracted. Well, sometimes the lack of concentration and those things, are part of a disability. But again, that doesn't, we should not infer that we are thinking, one way or another. Yes, this video, guys, is actually very good. I did not want to play it during the presentation because it's a little bit in length, and the woman who gives this presentation is a license. She has a license and great understanding of disabilities, and she works with a college and university with her services. A lot of people who work in tutoring centers and different places that work with students with disabilities actually have degrees and such, which is why I'm kind of bringing this to us in the easy kind of what we can do with what we have versus, something where, North Campus or Kendall Campus has particular tutors that have experiences with working with people who are blind and such. But if you take a look at this video, it gives very good strategies and opportunities to understand different disabilities and what may be helpful. The interesting thing is there's not a lot right now, guys, out there on how to help students in tutoring in the remote opportunity. I think it's being developed, so I know that us as an institution and us as the United States, those things are going to be coming. So just because you can't find it in the universe right now doesn't mean that it's not going to develop. But on the flip side to that, we may be the people that develop it. The training that you're having now, this gets you, like I said, part of a certificate and part of an opportunity of something that was created by personally by me, just for the opportunity for all of us, again, to have an understanding and to show others that we had it, so the common knowledge can be shared and again be helpful to our students. So if you have ideas, guys, establish them, run with them, create things with them, and let go. I'll get off the soapbox of positivity. We'll go back to the question, but we'll come back to it. So how do I refer the student? Well, if we go back to the question that we asked the student, by the way, while I'm trying to help you, are there any of these services that you're connected to? Da da da. If the student doesn't say, oh no, I'm not connected to any of those, you can't really refer them to something without making them feel maybe, oh, why did that person tell me I should go here? So again, you're not going to directly tell them, go to Access, da da da. But you can say things like, well, forget, if you don't know anything about those offices, maybe we even create, maybe I'll create and give it, or, someone, but we can make something, um, learning resources with a definition and a web link, access services definition of web link. Maybe we create something like that as tutors and we can work with our campuses to just have like a campus like cheat sheet of services, and then you can kind of like pass it on. Maybe we make it like a bookmark, or maybe we make it to something where we give to everyone and then it's like, here they are. Now I will tell you, just because we do that doesn't mean a student is going to connect in that moment, but it's a possibility. So does anybody have any thoughts about connecting a student to an Access office? Do we feel a little bit comfortable with it, maybe? Okay, I got one. I feel better about it. Good. Okay, thank you, Alejandro. Okay, so what strategies can I use to assist a student with a disability? So like I said earlier, if you don't know a student has a disability, but in the conversation of, hey, are you connected to these services? Or you can even say, oh, are you involved in campus? We have lots of clubs and organizations. Again, this isn't meant to, take a whole lot of time, because I know your time here with them is pressed. You probably have students waiting for you. You have, things you need to do. I get it. But sometimes that little story or that little extra piece kind of gets them, oh, this person cares about me. This person cares about my success being here. They want to know that I'm, connected, or that I can relate, or that I am aware of these things. So within that conversation that you're having with the student, that you can see what the opportunity is in helping that student as they give you information. But like I said, for any students, we should be asking them, well, when you review or when you have questions, how are you studying? And through those types of questions, we can see how to help the student best. They will tell you, a student with autism will tell you, hopefully, that they need things to be blocked out. It needs to be one concept at a time, which is a lot of the reason why students may come to tutoring, because a professor, maybe we went too fast through lesson 1.2 and 1.4 in math class, and they understand it, but it needs to be blocked up so that they understand it conceptually, that they can see it. Students with learning disabilities, it's very helpful for their brain to see a step process. First step 1, second step 2, third step 3, and then as you're going through these steps, use a checks and balances opportunity. Okay, we've done step 1. Let's see what that looks like. And maybe even have that student do an example. Now, being in remote, it may be a little bit harder to have them to do an example. So maybe it's through conversation. Or maybe it's, hey, can you show me if you use a whiteboard and the student can interact in such a way? Have them reproduce what you're doing with them to see that they are attaining that. Okay, now something else to remember is certain students who have autism or even various levels of learning disabilities, they may click their pen. That makes some people nervous, but that is something, a coping mechanism that sometimes students may have. So if you notice that, you can say, oh, you can ask them, are you nervous? And if they say they're nervous, okay, what can I do to take that? What can I do to help you there? And if they say, no, that's just a thing that I do, we kind of have to accept that and kind of go with it. If a student seems to be distracted or maybe even multitasking while you're tutoring them, they are doing something else. Guess what, guys? Sometimes they are, in fact, paying attention to you, but the way that they're refraining and retaining it is simply allotted them to do something else. So don't take that personally, but you can also ask. You can say, "Oh, can I just check in with you? I see that you're, doing something else at the moment, and I don't want to interrupt, but I want to make sure that we're having the best experience for you and that I'm able to help you in a way that you're understanding." Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the best way that you're going to get students to be able to communicate with you. In fact, that they're retaining and understanding what you're giving to them. Okay. Also, there's opportunities to help them in the way that you're tutoring them. Maybe because you're breaking things down step by step, you offer them the process to be able to repeat that in their classes, in their notes. Maybe you're encouraging them to take better notes. Again, just because they have a disability doesn't necessarily mean we have to spend all of this extra time, establishing things that don't exist. Maybe we do become creative and find a way to help, students with different needs through being creative. But sometimes those students, because of their disabilities, because of where possibly they went to school or what services they didn't have, and now they have them. And guys, I will tell you, there are many students that my office, a college-wide, sends for referrals to psychologists and psychiatrists and different organizations to get psychological testing to see if they have a disability because they believe that they've had, but they've never been able to, forgive me, but afford the opportunity to be tested or know who to go to have that testing done. It is expensive. But if you don't have resources or know that such things exist, the student may have suffered with battling something that could be worked on, could be controlled differently, and can be looked at if they knew how to do it. So sometimes students are receiving services from Access for the very first time because over summer they were able to be assessed and, oh, look, they have ADHD or they have mild autism or they have something. So sometimes the disability is just so new to them in being able to have strategies that some of these studies guides and study tips and things that you suggest is going to help them actually create what they're creating for themselves moving forward. So know that. No pressure, but know that you are actually helping these students kind of establish the pillars of how they're going to study over time. You can also ask the student, hey, have you taken SLS 1106, which is the orientation to college class? And how did you review things like, and this way you can see maybe they haven't taken that class yet. But if they have, if they explain to you the struggles that they had in there, that may also be able to help you with kind of figuring out what to and how to help them with. Now, the challenge here is I know that some students will find the same tutors to, go to each time and do whatever, and sometimes they don't. So another key question that I would ask is, have you gone to tutoring before? At MDC, have you come to our particular campus and see if they have, see who they worked with, and maybe it's helpful to even connect that student back to that person, just so they have something, solid. If again that person is available, that may be like an extra piece of being helpful. So does anybody have any questions or thoughts for that concept? Okay. I don't see any questions.
I
Um,
raised my
oh,
hand.
okay. I didn't see it.
No worries.
Yeah.
So just a quick question as far as the questions to ask and if they've been to tutoring before, just to clarify what the principle is. So we are not supposed to like note down if a student if they self-identify, they self-identify to us. But we're
Yes.
not supposed to note that down because that takes away from their
Right.
power to self-identify. So no noting it down, uh, but
Correct.
you can you verbally communicate that to a fellow tutor who's about to work with that student?
I would say yes in such a way that, as a tutor, no matter what you do, no matter who you work with, you take in information all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we keep things confidential all the time. So it could be one of these things to a fellow tutor. Hey, I just wanted to let you know, this student we're working on this particular area. They are a student, with access services. They did convey that they had, XYZ disability, and you can keep it on the down low. Now, this is not something I know that sometimes when students come to tutoring, you guys do go into EAB and note the tutoring session, and I've seen notes, in there about different things. That's not something you would want to note in the notes section. But you can say that you worked with that student on particular skills, particular things, and maybe even the tutor that works with them next. And maybe this is an interesting practice for us to look at, but can we as tutors go into the system and see if there's previous notes from whoever worked with the student, if a student was worked with, and see what those notes say, so it kind of helps work with that student kind of, again, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So then it would be helpful because we're all tutors across all campuses now have access to navigate for
Right.
maybe in our reports to know not to say that the student is an access, but to specifically note what helpful strategies and
Yeah.
practices and maybe what they said has helped them in other classes, and that can
Yeah.
prepare the next tutor better.
Right, and then it's kind of just, oh, let me see if I have notes here. Oh, I have a few. It says this, this, and this, and I think it's a thing that would be helpful to many students, and then this way it also saves time, because then the next tutor doesn't necessarily have to use inquiry at such a high level of, okay, let me see where the student sits, and then go from there, because notes are there, and then that person can kind of just go and maybe spend a minute or two investigating, anything, where did you leave off last, da, da, da. I see that you've been to tutoring before, you know and kind of go from there. Make sense?
Yep,
Yes,
sure does.
teamwork. Teamwork. All right, so we have one last thing, which will take like 1 minute, if that, because I was just warned we have less than 3 minutes now. But what should I do if I don't know how to help the student best? So there's a few opportunities here. Like I said, if we do establish the opportunity to use the notes in EAB and put what we did last, and the next tutor does see that and says, whoa, I'm really not good at mapping out this things in this process or whatever. See if there's another tutor that can co-tutor with you. Because we're in remote, I know that that may be harder, or a little bit more challenging, but we figure out our challenges and we do best. Meet with that student, and again, have the conversations and say, hey, this is just how you're struggling a little bit here. I'd also have a struggle doing this, so let's work together and see what we can do. Let them know, you're not perfect, and it's okay to know that. When you finish with the student, though, if, like I said earlier, if you want to refer to an access office and say, hey, I was working with a student earlier, you don't have to convey the name of the student. But if they in fact are registered with Access, conveying the name to the Access director is just fine because those are our students. And you can say, I was working with the student and this is da da da, and then that Access director can touch base with that student or maybe offers, tutoring that they're aware from their office if they have such. And as a team, we can figure these things out. The last thing that I'll say about this is a lot of times we may not know what's going on in the universe as a college. If students don't come to us and ask, but then us as the employees, if we don't try to figure it out and take it to a higher level and share with other people, hey, this is a challenge, this is a thing, do you have ideas, then these kind of sit dormant. So just remember that. I will, the last slide, because we are out of time, but it was interesting because this slide is used a lot and we actually did see it earlier, but this is totally a slide that goes in most of our Access presentations because this is reviewing, what we did earlier. I put my email address down there, but like I said, I'm Corrinne Lockamy. I'm the director of the Access Department at the Hialeah campus. I am an office of one, so I only say that because different offices have different people. But because of that, I also go to my colleagues at my campuses and college-wide and ask questions and probe and get information. So guys, please don't be afraid to ask questions and share comments. On that note, we need to go, and I appreciate you and have a wonderful break and happy holidays. And please leave comments where you can if you want. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Corrinne. Thank you, participants. I just put in the link to back to the main room for us all to easily pop back in for the closing session. Thank you all for attending.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Corrinne. This was absolutely great, and I will look for you for any symposium or any session anywhere.
Oh, no worries. Thank you much.
Thank you, Corrinne. So much
Have
information.
a wonderful day.
Really helpful information. Thank you so much.
Just wanted to jump in there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was great information, super helpful.
You're so welcome. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks.